Hi guys, Recap Corner here. Today, we're gonna be doing a big breakdown to discuss our film Dahmer. Spoilers ahead. Be prepared, grab your popcorn, sit back, and get ready for a wild ride. The movie portrays the life of Jeffrey Dahmer, a notorious American serial killer who killed 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. His cold-blooded execution methods, which involve mutilation, taxidermy, necrophilia, and cannibalism, have earned him a place in history as one of the most brutal serial killers. However, this movie focuses on Dahmer's high school years. During the 1980s, evil began to take shape. At the beginning of a high school bus ride, Jeffrey Dahmer was one of the students on board. Unlike his fellow students, he sat alone and stared out the window. Suddenly, he noticed an adult man jogging nearby and became fascinated with him. Even after being dropped off at home, Dahmer continued to stare at the man as if he had become obsessed. Later, as Dahmer was cautiously carrying a plastic bag, two teens approached him and asked what was inside. Dahmer replied that he had found a dead cat which he intended to dissolve in acid. As his father was a chemist, he had access to various chemicals that would help him conduct his experiments. Although the guys were weirded out by the process, they nonetheless accompanied Dahmer to his father's shed. Dahmer explained the process and mentioned that he was interested in bones and anatomy. However, the boys thought that he was simply pouring water to fool them. Hearing this, an enraged Dahmer broke a jar containing roadkill that he had dissolved earlier. The animal emitted a foul stench, and as a result, the boys were grossed out. They called Dahmer a freak before leaving the place. Afterward, we're introduced to Dahmer's family. His father, Lionel, is a college chemist, and his mother, Joyce, is a housewife. They frequently quarrel about trivial matters, which has a detrimental effect on their children. Speaking of children, Dahmer has a younger brother named David, who is innocent but boisterous. Despite being ill-mannered to his wife, Lionel always supports his children and hopes that his elder son will become more sociable at school. Dahmer is frequently bullied for being peculiar. He sits alone and occasionally steals preserved animals from the biology class. Upon returning home after a strenuous day at work, Lionel discovers that Dahmer is still fixated on dead animals. In a fit of anger, he storms into the shed and proceeds to throw all the preserved animals into the trash can. He also scolds Dahmer, urging him to make genuine friends and put an end to his morbid obsession. The following morning at school, Dahmer attempts to converse with a few of his classmates but is unsuccessful in his efforts. Later that day, he is sitting by the road feeling dejected when he notices the same jogger from before and becomes excited. Upon returning home that night, Lionel apologizes for being harsh on Dahmer and gives him a pair of dumbbells. Dahmer takes up the suggestion and begins to work out, but he continues his hobby of killing animals and collecting their bones in secret. One day at school, a teacher catches Dahmer not paying attention and asks him a question. In a light-hearted tone, Dahmer responds in a comical manner, much to the delight of everyone in the class who burst into laughter. Dahmer understands that he needs to make friends and decides to take an unconventional approach. He starts making strange noises and even feigns having a seizure in the hallway, which draws the attention of many students. Though it's initially embarrassing, Dahmer's plan ultimately works, and he gains some new friends. Over time, Dahmer continues to use his strange behavior to get noticed and make more friends. Dahmer's social life takes a turn for the better when a group of teenagers, Durf, Mike, and Neil, approach him in the cafeteria and invite him to sit with them. The four quickly become close friends and begin to come up with elaborate pranks to spice up their senior year. They encourage Dahmer to make strange noises in the library and pretend to have seizures in the hallways. While his social life improves, Dahmer's personal life takes a darker turn. One day after returning home, Dahmer discovers that his mother, a former drug addict, is experiencing a relapse. Despite his efforts to persuade her to seek medical attention, she refuses to listen. Despite this, Dahmer continues with his life. One day, while fishing with his friends, he catches a fish and proceeds to stab it multiple times, claiming that he is interested in what is inside. This obviously disturbs the other boys, but they choose not to confront Dahmer about it. Meanwhile, Dahmer also develops a habit of hiding behind bushes by the road to stalk a male jogger. He seems to have become infatuated with the man. Lionel brings out a bottle of alcohol to calm himself down after his parents argue, But the cunning Dahmer sneakily steals it. This is when he starts drinking. Over the course of several days, he eventually learns the man's identity through his friend Mike. He is Dr. Matthews, a well-known physician in the area. In the following days, Dahmer begins showing up to school late and drunk. He also continues his disturbing hobby of killing animals and dissecting them. A few days later, Dahmer and his classmates go on a school tour to Washington, D.C. Dahmer is assigned to share a room with Charlie, the only black student in their class. In an odd and offensive moment, Dahmer asks Charlie if his insides are the same as other people. Although Charlie is understandably offended, he chooses not to take any action, likely because he is accustomed to hearing racist remarks. Upon returning from the DC school tour, Dahmer's father informs him that he and Joyce are getting separated. Lionel plans to stay in a motel for the time being, leaving Dahmer to deal with the news on his own. The news weighs heavily on Dahmer, causing him to have difficulty sleeping that night. One morning, Dahmer feigns a cold in order to meet his crush, Dr. Matthews. However, things take an awkward turn when the doctor discovers that Dahmer has an abnormal erection during his checkup. After the encounter is cut short, Dahmer sinks deeper into depression. He remains silent when his friends discuss girls, implying that he's not interested in them. The combination of his parents' divorce and his strange sexual preference drives him to the brink of insanity. He begins drinking heavily, even at school, much to the disgust of his friends. His despair deepens when his parents start fighting over custody of him and his brother, David. The next morning, as Dahmer's friends are having a party, some classmates ask about Dahmer. Durf mentions that he's been absent, but the other classmates claim that he's moved on because he finds his friends boring. This angers Durf, and he decides to prove them wrong by challenging his classmates to get Dahmer to perform one of his infamous seizure acts in a mall. Neil is uncomfortable with the idea, but Durf doesn't care. On the following day, Dahmer's friend Durf offers him a bribe and convinces him to perform one of his infamous seizure acts at the mall during the weekend. Dahmer agrees, and several boys head to the crowded mall where Dahmer starts faking seizures. His friends laugh, and one even records the act on his camera, while Dahmer continues to make a fool of himself. However, when the act is over, Dahmer finally realizes that his friends treat him like a spectacle and not as a true friend. Dahmer's mind becomes even more troubled when he arrives home to find out that his mother has finalized her divorce from Lionel and that Lionel has gained custody of the house. Everything that has been happening in his life takes a deadly toll on Dahmer's mental health. One day, Dahmer waits with a bat intending to beat up Dr. Matthews, but fortunately, the doctor never shows up. As a result, Dahmer loses his patience and starts hitting a nearby tree viciously until the bat breaks. Later that evening, a group of kids from the neighborhood were walking through the woods when they stumbled upon a dead dog with its insides spilled out. The news quickly spread throughout the town, and residents began to speculate that there was a psychotic person living among them. The following day, the school is buzzing about the upcoming prom, and even Dahmer's friends are excitedly discussing their plans. Despite Mike's mocking comment that no girl would want to go with someone as odd as him, Dahmer decides to take a chance and ask a freshman named Bridget. Unfortunately, she declines his invitation. However, Dahmer's cunning side kicks in, and he invents a rumor that going to prom with a senior automatically makes freshman girls popular. Bridget is easily taken in by this lie, and she agrees to go with him. The following evening, Dahmer and Bridget attend the prom together, and it's an uncomfortable experience for both of them. Dahmer's friends are taken aback by the unlikely pair, and as Dahmer goes to get drinks for himself and Bridget, Neil approaches him to apologize for the mall incident. Dahmer accepts the apology, but he still struggles with the social situation. When it's time to dance with Bridget, Dahmer is visibly uncomfortable and avoids making eye contact with her. It's clear that Dahmer is not interested in girls and has trouble socializing with them. Eventually, he excuses himself and eats alone in his car. When Dahmer arrived home the following day, he discovered his mother packing her belongings to leave. The worst part was that she planned to take little David with her. Joyce tried to say goodbye to our eldest son son, but he didn't respond and just retreated to his room. There, he fell apart and began hurling objects around in a fit of rage. On the day of his graduation, Lionel congratulates Dahmer for his achievement and hands him the keys to the family car. However, Dahmer seems disinterested and distant, still grieving the absence of his mother. One night, Durf spots Dahmer walking alone on a dark road and offers him a ride. Dahmer appears upset and has strange blood marks on his hands, which Durf questions him about. Dahmer brushes it off, saying it's just paint, and they start discussing friendship. However, unlike Neil, who apologized for his behavior, Durf refuses to acknowledge that he treated Dahmer like a spectacle. This angers Dahmer, but instead of confronting him, he invites him over to his house for some beers. However, once inside, Durf becomes alarmed when he notices Dahmer standing awkwardly close to him and decides to leave. On their way out, Dahmer grabs a baseball bat and attempts to hit his friend but fails. Durf soon gets in his car, and as he's about to drive away, he notices the baseball bat in Dahmer's hands. That night, Dahmer drinks excessively, and his mind is consumed by paranoia. He fears that he is turning into a monster and is terrified that he almost assaulted his friend. The conflicting emotions of fear and pleasure, stemming from the idea of dominating and killing someone, overwhelm him. The movie concludes with a chilling message that Stephen Hicks' disappearance was just the beginning of Dahmer's killing spree. His heinous crimes went unnoticed for many years until he was finally caught and arrested for the murder of 17 men and boys in July 1991. The film ends with a reminder of the tragedy and loss caused by Dahmer's actions, leaving a lasting impact on the audience. Thank you for joining us into our review. We hope you had as much fun watching it as we did breaking it down for you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a video from us.